All right, this tutorial will continue our exploration of animation techniques. And in fact, we want to work still with the same running dude or walking character. I don't care if you created it yourself or got something from Poser or Carrara, Lightwave, Cinema 4D, whatever. 3D Studio Max, your game engine. You have an image sequence, maybe PNG with transparency. If not, turn it with transparent background inside of Howler. And now you want to draw that against a background that's going to be animated. And sure enough, we could create a animation out of this background. And it's a static image, but we could certainly do something like create an animation of, let's say, 90 frames. So we have a 3-second long animation if it's at 30 frames per second. And we could do apply a little bit of a transform to that. Let's see, go to the transform, zoom in, scale it in a little bit, so that you then have the ability to, nothing happening. Oh, we must have the alpha channel on. Okay, that's a key one to remember when you import an image. Sometimes you have an alpha channel that gets initialized to empty. So make sure you blend that, check on that first, right? If nothing's happening, maybe there's an alpha channel that's masking it off. You can also see alpha overlay will give it away. That's a dead giveaway right there. If it's turning pink, it's all blocked away. So clear the alpha, then create your transform. Let's go to transform, there you go, and scale it up. Now we are in business. Okay, so now we can go, and we have a little bit of leeway here because we have, the image is scaled up bigger than we need to actually see the whole thing. So we could go and do a little panning action here, going from the left. Let's give it a little bit more resolution here, a little bit more granularity. So we go to the leftmost frame and keyframe that, go to the rightmost frame, and then just change the translate X to go to the other end and make sure you don't walk off the edge here. And then keyframe that and render. Apply that. So now we have this animation nicely going across from left to right. So we have the animation that we need to walk our dude across it, right? That would be with the Alt key down, so that we have this guy running across and continuing to run. And we can also make it zoom it down a little bit and perhaps keep painting a little bit on the outside until we see him come back, because eventually we'll cycle through from the last frame to the first frame again, right? So or we can just go to the first frame. There it is. All right, so let's say we want to have a fighter plane, a helicopter, whatever it is that's flying from left to right. We can have it go a little bit faster, a little bit slower by adjusting the step distance. But that's all going to be fine and dandy, but the background is still going to be flat. It's going to be 2D, right? It is an image, a single image that we are moving sideways, that we moved sideways. It already has been moved. We might store the brush and perhaps give us a couple of small dudes running across here as well. So show the preview so we can see them. There you go. And then with a reduced step distance, actually have them go from left to right and have a whole line of them going, right? Because we now have more stamps coming down, more brushes being rendered, then we know what to do with. So have them a little bit bigger, increase the step distance. We've done this in the prior tutorial. The thing I'd like to cover now is what to do with this background. It's not, let's say it's not totally convincing because it's flat. Now, in some games, that's fine. You have a scrolling game. It's going fast, it's blurry, whatever it is, you're not going to see too much of it, it's good enough. But if you want to have a little bit of a perspective to that and see things change as they're hiding as they go in front, and then obscuring or revealing details as they go to the side, you really want to render that transition, that pane, that panoramic sweep. You want to render that in 3D. And so what I'd like to do as the main focus on this tutorial is to actually show how to do that. There's a couple of ways to do it, but if you want to do something that's like an endless sweep, there's a special twist to that. pun intended, and you'll see why. So what I'll do is I'll go to our classic technique to create a plasma noise. And actually, remember, we start with something different. Let's go erase. And normally we would have gone to the linear gradient tool. And if you followed those tutorials for the, what was it, the river canyon, we did something like this, right? Or if you wanted a canyon to go diagonally from the lower right to the upper left corner, we might have done something like this. This kind of channels or helps which way the river main direction is. And then when we did the filter, render, plasma noise, and we set that mode not to opaque but to difference mode, then we got our river to kind of contain inside that channel. Well, this time we'll need a channel that's circular. So let me show what we'll do. We'll start with an image that is a little bit bigger and preferably a square. Let's make it 1200 by 1200. And that's about as big as it will be needed to fit on screen. And so now, instead of doing a diagonal like this or like that, I need one that's circular. But it needs to be black on one side and white on the other. So black on the inside, white on the outside, or the other way around. So there's a couple of ways to handle that. One way you could do this is simply fill a circle right here. Let's go clear this and then fill. Why do I have email when I'm trying to do this? I'm going to have to cut that out. So here it is. Here's a circle, and I want to blur that a little bit. So let's go and blur. Gaussian blur is quick and fast, but sometimes it's not enough of a transition. Maybe it's too narrow a transition, so apply that 2 or 3 times, and then after a while you'll get tired of that, right? You say, well, we need more blurry. One thing I'd like to do is perhaps let's make this a little bit smaller, the whole thing. So one way to make it smaller is to threshold it down to the smallest level, and then blur again. And now this time, instead of the Gaussian blur, I'm going to do a motion blur and give it a lot of motion blur like this, because I don't really need it fully symmetrical in this circular way. Now I'm needing to shift that, so I'm going to go to the transform and shift it, grab the hand and shift it to the center roughly, and then perhaps I can do some more blurry. Let's do Gaussian blur again. Another blur that's pretty useful here too in this context, which is not to waste time like me here, is to use a zoom blur. And with the zoom blur you can just blur it out really nicely, give it high quality, blur it to a high level. And so there we go. Now one thing we'll do is we'll start with that for our, let's take a snapshot of that. You never know, you might want to go back to that. So here's our snapshot, and now let's go to the render, plasma noise, just like we did in the past, but this time you can see that this river is kind of in a somewhat oval container. Let's give it something like level 9. Click a few times until it's kind of nicely contained. That one's pretty neat. I want it a little bit bigger though, a little bit more on the outside, so just keep trying. It doesn't have to be perfect either. What you do want is to have enough margin along the side so you'll be able to elevate these to high peaks. The bright stuff is what we're looking for, and if it's not quite there yet, we'll just add it. So let's go with this one. And for instance, one thing you could do now is go back to that linear gradient, but use the gradient that you see here, in a black to white, in a multiply mode, or in an additive mode rather. So mode additive, so that when you see here, that's not the way you want it, that's the way you want it. Let's go undo and go from here to the outside. So you see it's kind of adding the brightness to it. Same thing here, kind of adding the brightness up here, going up, adding, and essentially I'm kind of saturating it. Now maybe that's too flat. That'll do a plateau, and maybe we really need peaks like alpine mountains. What I'm going to do eventually is put the camera in the middle, and that's the elevation map here, and I'm going to put the camera in the middle and look around in a circular way, so it will make it a looping sweep. I can sweep my camera looking all around, or turn the whole thing and essentially still look in one direction but turn the whole thing, and it will look like an endless panoramic sweep. unless you have some really great photographic memory, you won't notice when we reach the same beginning again as we get to the end. So one thing I'd like to do is perhaps also make this part in the middle here a little bit lower, kind of flatten this down to a little bit of a plateau level. So there's a couple of different ways to do that, of course. One thing I'll do is I'll play with painting, because this is, after all, a paint program. So one thing I'll do is I'll grab my lasso tool to build myself some sort of a random shape that will be picked up as the brush that I'll paint with. But I want this to be a bit more blurry, not such a crisp transition. So I'm gonna go to the selection and Gaussian blur, and then so here we can blur that, and now pick this up as a custom brush. That would be here. Pick it up as a custom brush, and there we go. So we have this custom brush. Preview it if it's off. There you go. Keep it perhaps at full opacity or less. And then instead of painting on it, you want to reduce the brightness. So you want to put the mode to subtractive, right? And then so that will gradually bring you down to lower levels. Now it's keeping the same orientation, and that will start carving a pattern that you can recognize, especially when you turn this into elevation. So one thing I'd recommend is also enabling the transform, like here it is, and then have it change based on the movement, but also even the random size. Let's go to the settings, pin this down a little bit, and set the randomness for the scale based on the speed, random position, random size altogether regardless of speed, and random angle. You know, just randomly make things go a little bit the other way than what you're saying. And that's still getting dark too quickly, so I'm going to go undo and reduce the opacity even more. And so now we can just gradually bring this thing down to reasonable levels. Keep a few brighter spots that are going to be higher elevation, some domes and that sort of thing, but overall you want this just to get darker. And there's of course many other ways to do that. You might select it and then do something like a blur, or in fact, you might still want to do a blur on that. Let's go and let's do a little bit of adjust blur here, just a simple blur. There you go. Okay, so we have this elevation map. It's mostly bright outside. We can bring a couple of blotches here too, to make sure it's not all flat like a plateau, like a Grand Canyon upper level, but a little bit of noise, which will allow the erosion to take hold, right? We want erosion, we want sediments, we want it to look realistic. All right, so let's go and turn off the preview. Now we have this elevation map. Let's go and store this. And this is a keepsake. We definitely probably should save this just in case the program crashes. No, it never does that, does it? All right. So now let's see, minimize this. We don't need this dude quite yet. This will be later. So now we are going to turn this into an elevation map, but it is different from the past river canyons because this has a mostly circular shape or direction. So let's go to the 3D designer. And in 3D designer, if you increase the amplitude, you can tell, yep, there's definitely some borders that go way up high. There's the river going all around it here. Our plateau came down really flat, maybe too flat. We might want to adjust that a little bit. Let's go undo. You know what I'll do is I'll give it a couple of poles. I'll put a couple of domes here or there. And one fun way to do that is go back to the brush settings and go to the custom tab and set some sort of a custom brush where you increase or decrease the bias to almost nothing, like something like this. And then if you have the mode something like additive, there you go, and the color is not black but white, so let's switch those two. Now you have, oh, and the opacity needs to be bright enough that actually makes an impact. There you go. So now you have a couple of white spots, and in fact one thing I could do, let's undo this, and also do another thing, which is to make it much higher brightness, and then start painting on that just randomly, perhaps fewer of those. So let's give the step distance even more to work and look for. There you go. So with that we'll have a couple of bright spots. Undo that. That was not what I wanted. I want to keep the center part kind of empty. I don't want any in here. So let's keep it all outside. But here we can go a few more, and just keep kind of the center where the camera is going to come down as is. Now we might want to have a few, but not as bright. Remember, the brightness will dictate the elevation. In fact, if these are too high, do an interactive undo of the most recent action, so you can bring them down to maybe half the brightness. And we'll do the same with the ones in the middle, but even more. So here we will allow a couple of these, but then we'll also bring them down to even lower value. So it's just tiny little bits of elevation that we're seeing here. Dark gray is all we want. All right, so that's the elevation map. Let's go store that. And hold on a second. And I'm not sure if you can hear that. It sounds like there's a train, a freight train going through the house. It's the washer, the clothes washer. I think there's a ball bearing that's busted and it's making an awful grinding noise. Anyway, I need a new one. So, please buy Dog Waffle. We are going to now do the next thing, which is to go into animation. No, not yet. Filter, transform, right? So here's where we go to the 3D designer. Okay, and in the 3D designer, here we go. We now see those spiky poles or domes or whatever you want to call them. Let's go in a little bit. You can see that indeed, if you turn this around, we have a nice circle of mountains around it. And we can simply position our camera right in there, right above it. In fact, a good way to do that is to look at it from the top and just make sure we are, there you go, something like this. Zoom back a little bit and say we want to be around here in the middle. Then you tilt it back to the sideways view and you can adjust the elevation. And now as you sweep your heading, you're pretty much staying in the middle. Right? Now it's not quite perfect. I think we are still a little bit away from the radius, and that's where it's going to be just a little bit touch and go and try and error to get really into the middle of the entire scene here. And then if you're successful, there you go, you have a nice panoramic sweep that kind of goes endlessly. Now you can change the camera zoom. That unfortunately also moves you in and out. So it does a little bit of a couple of things. It changes the angle, but also changes the position of the camera. So if you want to have a mostly flat look to it, I mean flat in terms of perspective, not much depth, perspective distortion, do this first and then move yourself back into the center. And so now you can do a sweep that goes like that, right? And then another approach is to have a bit more of a wide angle look, but make sure you go back to where you're actually inside the terrain, something like this. And so now you can see a bit more of a perspective geometry effect here. Alright, so now this doesn't look particularly good. We need to add a few more things. The usual, let's go more details, let's go add some erosion. And I love the erosion, but I don't want it here on the flat. Those little potholes, let's get rid of those. That's the flatness control here. Let's set it to about 7 or 8, and that should get rid of them. Let's go. Okay, that's fine. You want this battle? Let's go fight it. 15 is better. Let's go even more erosion. More rainfall will give you more erosion. We also want some sediments. So that's going to bring it back up, fill it in with some sediment deposits. And then we can also colorize this. If you want to add a little bit of snowfall look to that, bring the snow level down, bring the rock level down. Maybe we don't need any of this green in the bottom. Let's give it brownish. Let's get some sort of a dusty, sandy look to that. I don't know, something like this. Mud, and then we can also do take that grass level and fill it in so the deposits look like it's not the snow that's depositing. I mean, snow looks great too, mind you, here, right? So many different looks. Gray for rock. I like that what we call grass, but it's now really brownish color. Let's go add the color, adjust the lighting a little bit. Oh, the shadows. Let's go ray trace soft shadows. Let's go get this light source down, far away, brighter. And so that way, as we rotate the light source, we can see if maybe it's too low. Because remember, we have the border all around it now, right? If we turn our heading here, we can see that there's no light hitting it because the light source is somewhere behind the horizon here. So we need to bring it up higher. There you go. Now you can see that it's creeping over, reaching over that. That's an interesting look too. But then that's probably going to be somewhat flat looking on the other side. Yeah, there you go. See, the side is just getting the sunlight kind of from our direction. But this side looks good. So it's a little bit of a catch 22, 24, 23, somewhere around there. What you want to do is see perhaps also a little bit of specular, make it more look like some wet mud or snow. Let's see what else we can do. We could perhaps make it look like this light source is actually right above it, so we can still have it low. Longer shadows is really something I want, but I do want to have a little bit of a flat look. That didn't cut it. Okay, let's see. If I get the light source farther away like this, oh, that's interesting. Let's give it. Oh, I love this one. The trick maybe is to find where is the horizon, where's the mountain the lowest, right? So as you pan around, you might find, oh, there's a spot. If you put the light source here, it'll be possible to go the lowest without casting the shadow too much into it and not hiding this area. So that's one place. That's a candidate. Oh, there's definitely one. Okay, I may have actually hit it already. This one is definitely low. So let's see how low I can get the light source. Where is it anyway? Okay, let's bring it here from around here. Bring it up. Yeah, you can tell from the direction of these shadows that the light source is somewhere around here. So that's a pretty good place to be. Let's bring it down lower now, altitude down. Okay, and then of course there are other ways to brighten this up. One is the second light source. We have a second light source here. Let's bring it up all the way up, bring it down in right over the center, and then so that with that you can also bring a little bit of light into the shaded parts. But there are other ways, and one way to do that is actually with the ambient occlusion there. Now, multiply mode will bring some details. If you bring it up a little bit higher, you'll see that well. Another approach is to actually add a color in the background here. Give it some white or bluish tint, something like that. And then you can do the ambient occlusion in additive mode. Okay, and then that way you don't actually need to make everything brighter. So there's plenty of different ways to make this thing happen. And so if you want, you can kind of position your camera in such a way that you're right over this center, and then you basically are ready to go do your panoramic sweep in one direction or the other. One thing I would do perhaps is bring this down a little bit. Let's do without the ambient occlusion, just because it's faster, and I don't need to do 5 levels of anti-aliasing. I can do just 2. That'll be good enough, or maybe 3, right? And that's probably not quite it yet. I may want to play a little bit with the settings on this coloring here. So let's go do the create texture one more time and adjust how much, how far down the snow goes. Let's see if we want the snow in there. We'll change that. Let's go back to a kind of a brownish, muddy color instead of the grass, and we still call it grass though here in the interface. So that's kind of a deserty looking. And then one thing we can do is play with the amount of smoothing here. Let's see, for instance, 33 and 3 here. I mean, there's so many parameters to apply. Find what you like, and you might even add some clouds. Let's see, puffies. And now we are right in the middle, so unfortunately I think the clouds are going to be all over us. That might take a hit on your performance because this is very compute intensive. So what I'd recommend is first go outside of the center zone, so that you're not going to render all these clouds particles right all over you. This might actually hang, or it might just take forever, you know. And I don't have forever. So let me get back, reset this, and catch it from right there. Oh, welcome back. Well, guess what? I had to restart Dog Waffle, so shame on me for not saving that prior image elevation map. I just created a new one. But lesson learned, you know, please be warned, if your graphics card can't handle it on the GPU, you might want to have a safe backup copy of some of the steps and resources you create in between here. So let's continue with our 3D designer exploration. And that was basically right here. This terrain is a little bit different. It still has a mostly kind of a circular progression. I'm going to go quickly to add some erosion, add some sediments, add some coloration. I did like that brownish tint though, so let's go and give it a brownish mud looking, kind of a dark mud color, and then bring the snow down and have only a little bit of gray rock, something like that. And then I don't remember what the parameters were, but I'm sure we can find something that's really cool. There you go. Let's set the background color to something light blue, something like so. Let's enable ambient occlusion in additive mode. No, we said we'd disable that, but we do have the soft light for the cast light source here. Let's make it go a little bit farther away, higher altitude. We need to bring it around. Oh, and brightness, of course, intensity. There you go. So here we go. Let's see, where's the area? There, this area here. In this area here is we can bring the light pretty low and have long shadows without everything getting dark too quickly. So, oh, I forgot the poles. Let's add a few more here. So again, that's a trick I like to just add. Let's do a little bit of a dome look this time. Perhaps the bias the other way. Yeah, more something like that. And that should allow us to do a couple of domes bright. And then let's see, additive mode. Additive, full intensity. There you go. Let's bring, oh, that's way too big. We need to bring them a little bit closer. And maybe that bias thing was really still better on the negative side here. So, okay, so we got a couple of those. That's way too many though. Let's get the step distance much higher. Something like that. And then, okay, that'll be good. And reduce the intensity so they don't go all the way into the sky. It's good to have some of that, but not too much. And so the center part here is really where, let's see if we can put a spot, something right in the middle. So I'm going to enable, not the layers, I'm going to enable the grid and show something like artist guides there. That will give us, let's go temporarily invert the image. Since it's so dark, it's difficult to see. There you go. Now here we have this thing here. Maybe what we can do is put a little depression or something right in the middle. I'm going to go to my regular simple or airbrush, like a small or a medium brush, and just put something little here. Oh, that's not it. Let's go turn it around to black color. There you go. So something like this. Maybe even make it a little cross like that. All right. So, whoop. And okay, so the middle of that is really the middle of our terrain, right? And of course, we probably don't want that depression to be that black, you know, that deep, because when we reverse it, it'll be a very high ridge. We need this to be almost invisible. So one thing we could do is perhaps choose a selection mask here that's around like this, and then make this basically blurry here. Let's see, selection, show me the overlay. There you go. Let's control shift this around a little bit to center it, and then I want to simply filter that to blur, Gaussian blur, and blur this image that's in there to the point where you can barely see it, but it will have a little bit of a dome. It will have a little bit of an elevation. right? Now, right now it's a depression, but if I invert the image back, it's going to be a little bit of an elevation. And so it's subtle, but it's interesting enough that we can see it, and we'll probably want to actually have that as a visual reference. You know, whatever it is, put 1 pixel there or something, or a blob like this. Put something there that allows you to then later find where is the center of your terrain, right? Put the camera in such a way that you just barely see at the bottom of the view, you'll see this feature. And so now we'll go for sure into the 3D designer. Translate 3D designer, and in here we are still looking at all this stuff. This elevation is too high, but you know what, I'm running a little bit bored with myself here, so I'm gonna go yeah, no, we do need to make this lower, so it's too bright. So let's go a very simple airbrush, large airbrush 100. Let's make it black. Let's make it opacity low, but also make it subtractive mode, so it only brings it down even lower. Control D to clear the background if we need to. I think we do have subtractive mode here. Yep. Oh, but black is not going to subtract much. If it's already black, you cannot subtract more. So let's make it something like this. All right. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in here to see what I want to erase. I'll just erase it all. But then I'll undo with my interactive undo to erase only a little bit. Yeah, I want to see a little bit left. Don't go all the way to the edge, just a little bit. That means there's a pixel or 2 value here left. Now we have an elevation. Now we have a little dome we can live with. All right, this is the one I'm going to store. By the way, if you don't want to save it to file, at least do yourself a favor and go to the clipboard and copy it to the clipboard. If you don't need the alpha, that's a quick save copy. Because this one here is not safe. Right? This one is nice. It's a stored copy in memory. But if the program dies, bye-bye goes the image too. So here we go. Now let's go put this thing here. And I'm going to go and get my transform 3D designer one more time. Hopefully the last time. Famous last words, right? And now I can go and zoom in. And now I can go and move in. Or I can adjust my camera. Ah, here's that feature. Here's that little elevation, the dome. And I can zoom in some more. So I know I'm kind of really on top of it now, right? If I look down, there it is. And then if I look upwards, I can see all around here, and that dome stays right underneath me, and so that's where it belongs. And so one thing I'd like to do is really now do an animation of this, right? Do a panoramic sweep, perhaps add a few more things. Where was it that it died last time? It was when I was adding the clouds. So I'm gonna go this time, be careful, and go out a little bit before I enable the clouds, and we'll see the clouds right there in the middle. Let's bring it down in intensity. Let's bring them down in size also, so they kind of center. We can always scale them back up. Let's move them to the back there where the sun is shining from. That will make some nice, interesting, bright reflection or shiny effects here. Let's keep the scale at 1 or thereabouts, and then just see if we can move them a little bit sideways, like so, and a little bit up or a little bit down. There. So now if I'm putting my camera back into the middle, there is a direction like this one here in which we will see those clouds, right? As we turn the camera around, we'll see the clouds there. And then here we don't see them much. We might want to add some fog. Let's add some fog level here, right there. There's some fog. That's the distant fog. And there's also an elevation fog. So that's this one, the ground fog. Let's get the ground fog up here. And there we go. Let's bring it up. Oh, that's too much. That's a very intense, because it's going down all the way to 0. So yeah, that's not my favorite. Let's do without for this one now. So let's disable that. That's not any better. Let's go disable that. And at that point, we have very long shadows. We can adjust a little bit on that pre-filter. We can give it 2 or 3 levels of anti-aliasing. We certainly could go down a little bit here, adjust the position of the camera, and go a little bit closer into the scene to really be right on the middle there on top. Okay, not too much. There you go. So now, as we turn this around, we do a beautiful panoramic sweep. And for some of that sweep, it's better if we enable the ambient occlusion in additive mode, because these dark areas will start coming a little bit brighter. Or we work with the light source, right? We have some ambient light here, and hold on a second. Yeah, that's just a really noisy dishwasher back there, or clothes washer. What we'll do is we'll bring the light range up. Let's see if we can do without the ambient occlusion, and simply bring the light range up a little bit, altitude up, zenith down. A little bit of specular sometimes helps. And there you go. That'll be good enough for us common mortals. And what we'll do is just pan around like this, right? Now again, you can change the camera zoom to be a bit more sort of a telephoto lens look, and then you need to adjust the fog level, and the fog level perhaps something a little bit further down until you see the clouds again. That's good. So a lot of options to play with here. And let's see if we have here roughly the position we want to take, a little bit closer, right over this spot here. There you go. Okay. And so now we can find a very different looking scene. Let's get the pre-filter down a little bit so we get those spooky pikes to look a little bit sharper. And again, we can go look sideways and get the nice panoramic sweep. Alright, let's generate that sweep now. Okay, so I'm going to go cancel, and I'm going to create an animation. And let's say I want to have an animation that does a full 360-degree turn, and in 1 degree increments. So I need 360 images or frames, and hopefully that fits. Yep, this one here. My image is 1280 by 1280. It's going to be enough, small enough to fit in memory. Right, the limit is 2 gigabytes here. So I'm going to go and create this animation, and simply go back to the timeline where I can find the same filter, but with keyframeable parameters. So here it is, 3D Designer. Here we come. And in this 3D Designer, I'm going to keep the parameters as is. Don't really need to change much. I want to have the anti-aliasing level at a fairly good level. You know, if you wanted really the best quality, go all the way to 5. I'm going to go to 4 here. Let's go give it 4, a little bit brighter. That's good. And okay, and so now it's just a matter of setting the parameters for the position, because these are keyframeable, so you still have a bit of a control on that. So I'm currently outside. I need to go in. Let me use the right button to zoom into the scene. And then I'm going to go keyframe that. And then I'm going to simply change the heading from 0 to 360. Right, so I'm going to go around here to that end and change the heading to about, let's see, 180 would be half a turn, 360 is a full turn. There you go. Well, that's a little bit overshot. 360, where are you? There you go. 368. I know I see the 360, so it should be possible. There it is. I'm stopping at 360. And I'm going to go keyframe that. Now, if I wanted to go back to the first frame, I should see pretty much the same view. It's a little bit different. There's a nonlinear interpolation, maybe a truncation error. You can switch it to linear here if you want. Be careful, you might hit the bug there where it crashes. Always save often. You know, we constantly develop new features and find occasionally something glitchy. Depending on what you're doing and what system you're running, just be sure that this is not going to kill you. So what you want to do is perhaps move forward a little bit more, because as you see here, I am turning around, but I'm also gradually moving away or into the scene. I think no, actually it's pretty good. I'm not over the center part, but that's another type of animation you might want to do actually. This is one where we are inside of the big mountain range, but not right in the middle of the entire scene. We're kind of halfway in between. So we see this ring of those poles. We see them, even as we're turning around, we usually still see them around us. There's a place or two where we might actually accidentally move into the mountains, and that's where you might need to move up or down a little bit and adjust that. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to say let's go apply that. So this is now about to render, and it's going to take a while. This is highly anti-aliased, 4 level. That's like 16 renders, I think. It's fairly high quality in the end. And when you think about it, that's also a place where the anti-aliasing takes such a toll on the rendering time, that you wonder, do I really need to render every one of those 1 degree increments, right? If I want to do a full sweep of 360 turn, or even just a portion of it, let's say if I'm doing a 90 degree sweep, or I'm going not really in a circular rotation, I'm just going across sideways, and I'm doing a sweep, and if each frame takes, let's say, 10 seconds, 20 seconds to render, this one here, how many have we had now already? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rendered. There's another one. So it takes about 10-15 seconds per frame. It's not massive, it's not huge, but it's still, for some quick gigs and for some quick jobs, it's still too long. And so let's say you render that and you have 90 frames, or let's say 100 frames. And then you say, this is going too fast. I wish I had rendered that, or I could re-render that a little bit slower. There's a better way. Because this is a panoramic sweep, this is a good place to use the motion estimation. The motion prediction module will do usually a really good job when things just move sideways. And there is a little bit of topology changes as you see some of these spikes coming closer or moving sideways faster than the background. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's not just a side motion, but it's going to be subtle enough, I think, that we can probably get a nice smoothing interpolation on the motion prediction module as well. So in the end, if you know you're doing a sweep that ultimately is going to need to be, let's say, 6 seconds long, 180 frames, but you only have the time to render 60 frames, just do that and then use the motion interpolation to make it ×3 or ×4. And using the motion interpolation, if the quality is good enough, using the motion prediction is a much faster process than the actual rendering. I mean, here I'm rendering on the GPU and I'm still waiting for seconds per frame. It's a fairly decent CPU, mind you. It's not the fastest, latest. It's about 4 years old. It's a mobile graphics card. Probably has the equivalent of about 100 GPUs. Nowadays, if you're on a high-end gamer PC, you got 2,000-3,000 GPUs, right? I mean, this could be done by now. So it all is a function of how fast how new and how fast your graphic card is. Anyway, so that's that. I think that will give you hopefully some ideas of how you can create some nice panoramic sweeps, whether they are circular in motion or whether they are actually moving you sideways. It's all in these controls here. You got the heading that I'm changing right now. Instead, you could be changing the camera XY position, right? If you want the vertical motion, go with Y. If you want to go sideways, simply change the X value, keyframe it from one end to the other, and you're done. And you have just time to get a coffee, and the rendering hopefully will be done on your super fast graphics card. All right, thanks for watching, and stay alert for more tutorials.